You think when she feels you've lost interest, you lose your chance. But the truth is, when she feels you are no longer chasing, everything gets exposed. You think pulling back makes you less attractive, but what actually changes is that your absence stops covering up the truth neither of you wanted to face. Most men panic right there. The moment her energy shifts, the moment her replies get shorter, the moment she seems colder, more distant, more watchful, they assume they did something wrong, so they rush in. They explain more, they text more, they try to fix the mood, they become more available, more agreeable, more emotionally loud. And in the process, they destroy the one thing that could have changed everything, their center. That is exactly why you need reminders like this. Subscribe if you are serious about hearing truth before your emotions talk you into weakness again. Not because anyone needs your click, because you need stronger voices in your ear than your fear. You need to be reminded what self-respect sounds like when your mind starts begging for reassurance. You need truth repeated until panic stops sounding like love. Here's what it really means when she feels you've lost interest. The dynamic stops being carried by your pursuit and starts being tested by reality. That's the thesis. Simple, brutal, clean. When you stop overextending, stop over-explaining, stop feeding the interaction with anxious energy, what remains is the truth of the connection, not the fantasy, not the potential, not the version of it you kept alive with effort, the truth. And a lot of men do not want truth. They want control, they want certainty, they want guarantees. They want a woman to respond in a way that calms their insecurity. So when she feels that you've stepped back, they don't see it as a moment of revelation, they see it as danger. They think, if I don't push now, I'll lose her. If I don't say more, she'll forget me. If I don't prove my interest, another man will win. That's the misconception. The hard truth is this: if the only reason she stays engaged is because you constantly manage the energy, that is not connection. That is maintenance. That is emotional life support. That is you doing all the lifting while calling it chemistry. And men get addicted to that role. Why? Because it gives them the illusion of progress. As long as they are doing something, texting something, clarifying something, chasing something, they feel powerful, they feel involved, they feel necessary. But involvement is not the same as value. Effort is not the same as alignment. Motion is not the same as movement. So why does this happen? Because you have been trained to confuse pursuit with masculinity. You have been taught that if you care, you prove it endlessly. If you want her, you show it constantly. If she pulls away, you lean in harder. If she goes quiet, you fill the silence. If she becomes uncertain, you become more available. And nobody taught you the cost of that pattern. The cost is massive. You stop listening, you stop observing, you stop discerning, you stop asking whether she is reciprocal, you stop asking whether her actions match her words. You stop asking whether this connection actually nourishes you or just keeps your nervous system occupied. You stop leading your own life because now your emotional weather depends on how she responds. That's called self-abandonment. And it does not look dramatic at first. It looks like care. It looks like effort. It looks like devotion. But underneath it is fear. Fear of losing access. Fear of being replaced. Fear of not being enough unless someone else confirms that you are. So when she feels you've lost interest, what changes is not just her behavior. What changes is the mirror. Suddenly she cannot rely on your constant emotional output to define the connection. Suddenly she has to feel the space. Suddenly she has to notice whether she reaches, whether she misses you, whether she values your presence when it is no longer flooding her on demand. That changes everything, because presence has weight, but so does restraint. A man who is always there, always available, always reacting, often becomes invisible. Not because he lacks value, but because he keeps giving it away in a form that feels predictable, cheapened, constant, unmeasured. But what is constantly offered without discernment stops feeling precious. That is not cruelty. That is human nature. And before you twist this into a game, listen carefully. This is not about pretending to lose interest to trigger anxiety. That is manipulation. That is boy behavior. That is insecurity wearing strategy as a disguise. No, this is about what happens when a man genuinely stops over-investing in a one-sided dynamic and returns to himself. Different energy, different motive, different result. When that happens, she feels it. She feels the silence where your over-pursuit used to be. She feels the absence of your availability. She feels the missing validation. And now one of two things happens. Either she leans toward you because she actually values you and now has room to feel it, or she drifts because your attention was the only thing holding her interest together. Both outcomes are useful. Both outcomes are truth. Read that again in your soul. Both outcomes are useful because a mature man is not looking for endless ambiguity. He is looking for clarity. Too many men call confusion hope. They call inconsistency mixed signals. They call emotional crumbs potential. No, call it what it is. If your constant energy is required to keep her halfway engaged, then the connection was never standing on solid ground. It was standing on your effort. An effort without reciprocity becomes resentment. You know that feeling. You send the thoughtful message. She gives you one line. You make the plan. She says maybe. You show up with consistency. She shows up with mood. You try to understand. You try to be patient. You try to stay composed. But under the surface, something starts rotting because deep down, you know you are carrying more than your share. And instead of facing that truth, you keep trying to earn the outcome. That is the trap. You think one more conversation will fix it. One more act of patience will prove your character. One more display of loyalty will make her realize your value. But if your value has to be repeatedly demonstrated to someone who keeps receiving it casually, the problem is not your effort. The problem is your standard. That's the reframe. When she feels you've lost interest, what really changes is that your standard finally enters the room. The standard says, I will not keep pouring into a dynamic that does not pour back. The standard says, I can care without chasing. I can want without kneeling. I can appreciate a woman without making her the center of my emotional universe. The standard says my attention is meaningful because it comes from a life with purpose, not from emptiness looking for a target. That is a different man, and you can feel him immediately. He is not cold. He is not bitter. He is not passive aggressive. He is not playing disappearing games. He is grounded. He is calm. He is connected to his work, his body, his mission, his discipline. He is fully capable of affection, but he does not weaponize it against himself. He does not flood a woman with energy she has not earned. He does not keep auditioning after the room has already gone quiet. He notices, he adjusts, he remains himself. This man does not panic when her energy changes. He gets curious. He watches. He listens. He lets behavior speak. If she leans in, good. If she pulls away, noted. If she becomes inconsistent, he does not rush to interpret fantasy into facts. He stays with reality. He stays with what is. He does not need to force clarity because he is willing to see it. That is strength, not loud strength, not performative strength, not ego, not dominance theater. Quiet strength, the kind of strength that lets you hold desire without becoming desperate, the kind of strength that lets you care without collapsing, the kind of strength that lets you leave a one-sided dynamic without turning it into a courtroom drama. He knows something weak men do not. Attention is not love, access is not loyalty. Chemistry is not compatibility, and being wanted occasionally is not the same as being valued consistently. So when she feels he has lost interest, she does not feel a boy punishing her. She feels a man reclaiming himself. That hits differently, because now your energy is no longer asking, please confirm me. Now it says, I know what I bring and I know what I will no longer subsidize. That is not arrogance, that is self-respect. And self-respect changes the atmosphere of every relationship you walk into. You become harder to manipulate because you are no longer addicted to almost. You become harder to confuse because you stop negotiating with obvious patterns. You become harder to ignore because your presence is no longer cheap. You speak when there is something to say. You offer when there is something to build. You step back when reality calls for distance. No drama, no speech, no desperate closure ritual, just clarity. And clarity is attractive because it is rare. Most people are noisy. Most people are inconsistent. Most people live in emotional static. They say one thing, feel another thing, do a third thing, then expect you to decode the mess. But the man who has done the work does not live like that. He does not force what is not flowing. He does not chase what is not choosing. He does not beg where he has already been underappreciated. He understands something else too. When a woman senses that you have truly stepped back, not to manipulate, but because you have regained your footing, she is forced to confront her own position. Does she care? Does she miss your presence? Was she taking you for granted? Was she enjoying your energy without intending to offer anything real in return? Was she comfortable with you chasing because it kept her desired without requiring her to decide? Now the game is gone. Now truth is standing there with no costume on, and truth makes people uncomfortable. Good. Let it. Too many of you are trying to be pleasant when your life is asking you to be honest. Too many of you are trying to preserve access when your self-respect is asking for distance. Too many of you are trying to keep a woman interested while losing interest in your own standards. That is backwards. You do not become stronger by learning how to hold on to every woman. You become stronger by learning how not to abandon yourself in the presence of one. That is the lesson. So what do you do when you feel the dynamic shifting? When she becomes less responsive, less invested, less clear? First, stop overreacting, stop narrating, stop making every dip in energy mean the end of the world. You do not need to send a paragraph. You do not need to ask 3 emotional questions. You do not need to force reassurance out of someone who has not freely offered clarity. Second, observe the pattern, not the moment. Anybody can have a bad day. Anybody can go quiet once. Anybody can be distracted, but patterns tell the truth. Is she consistent? Is she intentional? Does she reach for you? Does she make room for you? Does her effort rise to meet yours, or does it only appear when she senses you detaching? Pay attention. Third, pull your energy back without theatrics. Not to provoke, not to punish, to protect your center. Shorter responses, fewer unnecessary check-ins, more attention on your own life. More time in your body, your work, your routines, your priorities. Return to your lane. Fourth, let the silence reveal. This is where weak men fail. They rush to fill the gap because the gap makes them anxious. But the gap is where information lives. The gap shows who reaches. The gap shows who notices. The gap shows whether the connection had its own pulse or was only surviving on your constant input. Fifth, if clarity is needed, speak simply. Not emotionally loaded, not dramatic, calm, clean. I'm interested in mutual effort. If that's not where this is, that's okay, but I don't do half-hearted. That's it. No begging, no attacking, no trying to extract an emotional confession. Just truth. Do this. Slow down. Watch actions. Protect your energy. Speak clearly when necessary. Keep your dignity. Keep your rhythm. Keep your life moving. Stop this. Stop over-texting to revive dead energy. Stop confusing anxiety with intuition. Stop rewarding inconsistency with more access. Stop turning every woman you desire into a referendum on your worth. Stop thinking that your willingness to tolerate confusion is noble. It is not noble, it is undisciplined. Redirect this, redirect your obsession into standards. Redirect your emotional hunger into purpose. Redirect your need for certainty into self-command. Redirect your attention into the life you are supposed to be building. The stronger your life becomes, the less likely you are to cling to what is unclear. And yes, something powerful often happens when she feels you have stepped back. She may reach out, she may lean in, she may become warmer, more intentional, more responsive. But if that happens, do not get drunk on the shift. Stay sober, stay observant. One burst of effort does not erase a pattern. One emotional comeback does not equal alignment. Let consistency prove what words and mood cannot, because this is not about winning her reaction. This is about becoming the kind of man who no longer betrays himself for temporary closeness. That is the deeper transformation. When you stop chasing, you hear yourself again. When you stop over-explaining, your dignity returns. When you stop begging for reciprocity, you finally notice how starved you had become. And that moment can hurt. Good, let it hurt cleanly. Pain faced honestly becomes wisdom. Pain avoided becomes repetition. So ask yourself the hard question. Have you actually lost interest in her, or have you finally lost interest in being undervalued? Those are not the same thing. One is emotional withdrawal, the other is awakening. An awakening changes your whole presence. You walk slower, you speak cleaner, you need less noise. You stop trying to prove your heart to people who keep showing you uncertainty with polished language. You stop romanticizing potential. You stop making excuses for behavior you would warn your own brother about. You become less available for fantasy and more available for reality. That is masculine maturity. Not control, not coldness, not emotional shutdown. Maturity. The ability to hold feeling without letting feeling drive the car off a cliff. The ability to care without bargaining away your standards. The ability to face disappointment without turning into a beggar or a cynic. And that man is rare now. He is rare because most men are either too soft with their boundaries or too reactive with their ego. They either over-pursue or they perform detachment. They either chase or they posture. Very few become grounded. Very few become honest enough to say, I like you, but not enough to lose myself. That sentence alone can save your life. Because some of you are not just losing women, you are losing months, losing focus, losing sleep, losing discipline, losing peace, losing momentum in your work because one uncertain connection has taken over your emotional bandwidth. For what? For mixed signals, for attention on installments, for a story you keep rewriting because you are too afraid to accept the ending that behavior already gave you. Enough You are not built to live in emotional fog. You are not built to keep shrinking your standards just to maintain access to someone inconsistent. You are not built to mistake your own overextension for love. Love does not require self-erasure. Connection does not require self-betrayal. Desire does not require desperation. So if she feels you have lost interest, let her feel the difference between your old energy and your restored energy. Let her feel what happens when your attention is no longer automatic. Let her feel what it means when your presence is no longer something she can assume without contribution, not as punishment, as truth. And if she rises to meet that truth, you will know more. If she disappears, you will know more. Either way, you win, because confusion loses its grip on you. That is the point. Not to make her chase, to make you clear, not to make her anxious, to make you anchored, not to create distance for effect, to create distance from self-abandonment. By the time you understand that, your whole relationship life changes. You stop pursuing from emptiness. You stop attaching to ambiguity. You stop falling in love with your own effort. You start choosing from alignment. You start valuing peace over intensity, consistency over sparks, mutuality over fantasy. And that is when everything really changes. Because then your presence means something, your absence means something, your words mean something, your silence means something. Not because you are playing a role, but because you finally have inner structure. You finally have boundaries. You finally have a self that does not vanish in the presence of a woman you desire. That is freedom. And freedom is attractive because it cannot be manipulated easily. A free man is warm but not owned, open but not loose, interested but not desperate, clear but not cruel. He does not need to win every woman. He needs to remain himself with every woman. That is why you are the answer, not her response. Not her mood, not her sudden curiosity after you pulled back, not her validation. You, your standards, your emotional discipline, your self-respect, your willingness to accept what is real instead of clinging to what is convenient. You are the answer. So the next time your instincts tell you to rush in and overgive because you feel her slipping, pause, breathe, return to yourself. Ask what the pattern is teaching you. Ask whether your energy is coming from strength or fear. Ask whether you are seeking connection or simply trying to avoid rejection. Then move like a man who has nothing to prove and everything to protect. That is how you reclaim your power without becoming manipulative. That is how you care without collapsing. That is how you let reality work for you instead of fighting it with fantasy. If you want more truth like this, more clarity when your emotions get loud, more reminders that pull you back into self-respect, subscribe. You do not need more romantic noise. You need sharper standards. You need language for what your gut already knows. You need the kind of truth that cleans your mind out and puts you back in command. Stay here if you are done confusing pursuit with value. Stay here if you are done feeding one-sided dynamics with your peace. Stay here if you are building the kind of presence that does not beg to be chosen because it already knows its worth. You are not losing when you stop over-chasing. You are finally seeing. And if you are ready to live from that level of clarity, then you already belong here.